Are you cruising through life not always knowing what direction you were headed? Let Live on Purpose with Dr. Paul Jenkins be your guide. Live on Purpose will give you insights into your life and show you how you can become the driver and captain of it. No more aimless wandering. By learning the principles that govern happiness and wealth, you will be able to make personal progress that you have only dreamed possible. And now, here's your host, the shrink who expands your life, Dr. Paul.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Live on Purpose Radio. This is Dr. Paul, the shrink who expands your life, here to bring you another episode of Live on Purpose Radio. I have been looking forward to this episode for quite some time, and I started hounding my guest, I don't know, a couple of months ago. I say hounding. We were just trying to make our schedules match. I want to introduce Pamela Hansen. Say hello, Pam.
Hello. Great to be here.
I'm so glad you're here with me.
Thank you.
You know what? Okay, I've got a bunch of things running through my head. I should just back up and tell people who the heck you are.
Okay.
I first got to know you on the sidelines of youth soccer.
That's right.
Because our children were playing on the same team. And one of those guys is over here running the podcast today.
So, he looks so grown up, my goodness.
Well, that's been a few years.
It's been a while, yeah.
But you know, I learned, and I had heard several years ago that you had written a book. And that always catches my attention because I interview authors all the time on my show. And then I learned a little bit about the story behind your book, and I got excited about that, picked up the book, and was just really impressed with this story that you told. The book is called Running with Angels. And this has been a fairly popular book, maybe more than you expected it to be.
Yeah, it's done better than I expected it would.
That's always a pleasant surprise.
Yeah.
But in this book, okay, I'm going to take a stab at the story, all right? And then you can clear up everything that I get wrong, and I want you to tell a little bit about your story as well.
Okay.
But this is set several years ago. Right about the turn of the century, right? Boy, does that sound bad or what? 2001. I'm just reading off of the back of the book right now. On a beautiful April morning in 2001, Pamela Hansen decided to do something she hadn't done for a very long time. She decided to take a walk. Though fearful that she would not be able to take more than a few steps with her morbidly obese body, she was desperate to focus her attention on something other than the tragedies of her life. And that just gives a really brief introduction to this really, what I feel is a very inspiring story. You've had some very difficult experiences in your family, including the death of some children. Mm-hmm. Which is very difficult for any parent to even consider. But this is something that you have been through not only once, but a few times, right?
Right. Uh-huh.
Now, as is often the case when people have difficult experiences in life, this has a very strong impact on a number of things, on how you see yourself, on how you feel, on how you relate with people, just the whole gamut. And these experiences and your life circumstances put you into a position where you found yourself losing control of your life.
Right.
Is that a fair enough way to put it?
Uh-huh. Yeah.
And, well, I'm not going to tell too much of the story. Why don't you pick it up from there?
Okay.
And just fill in some of the blanks. What was going on with you at that time? Pam, what was up?
Well, to back up to even further to 1989, I had twin daughters. Mm-hmm. And about 3 weeks before they were born, we figured out that one of them had a heart defect that was a fatal heart defect, hypoplastic left heart syndrome, where the left part of the heart just does not form. Uh-huh. And so we knew that Emily wouldn't have much time when she was born. And, of course, I prayed for a miracle, hoping that, and knowing full well that her heart could be restored if that was the plan. Mm-hmm. And so that was the miracle I was praying for, and it was not the one I received. They were born on February 3rd, 1989, and Emily's heart was it was diagnosed at primary or confirmed, and her twin sister Amy was also very small, and she had a few problems at birth, but she was just fine. I think trying to deal with having one and losing one, Emily lived for just a day.
Oh.
And it was just such a roller coaster of emotions, just a joy at being able to keep Amy and having, a wonderful husband, an older son, and then losing this daughter. I just went back and forth, and then she had to be fed every couple of hours. And so I think I mistook the fatigue, the stress, the happiness, the grief for hunger. And it was really easy to reach for food for comfort at that time.
That was the way you kind of self-medicated.
Yeah. I mean, my weight's always been a problem. It's always going to be a challenge for me. But at that time, that's when it really started getting out of control, and was furthered by a few years later. We had a daughter. She was diagnosed after a year and a half of going to doctor after doctor with juvenile rheumatoid arthritis. Oh. And all these doctors didn't know what was wrong with her. She was limping, she was hurting, and they couldn't figure out what was wrong. And finally, after she was diagnosed, we got her some help. And she had about 10 real tough years. Arthritis in children is a manageable disease, and yet it's just really a tough thing too. And to watch them go through is really hard. So we were struggling with that, and then we had another daughter who was diagnosed with a really rare disease called Olier's disease, which means she's got tumors growing inside her bones. And at the time she was diagnosed, let's see, that's been about 8 years. We didn't know how serious it would be. But as time goes on, it seems to be a mild case. She has had one surgery, and she'll have a few more, and we're not 100% sure of her future, but we're optimistic about it. So all these things led up to that spring morning in 2001,
right,
where I felt like, there was little control over my children's health, and it seems like since then I have come to know so many people have things over which they have no control in their lives, and not that we have to have absolute control over everything, but it's really a helpless feeling sometimes. And so we felt like we had our hands full with these children, and so when I became pregnant, it was a miracle. And so that kind of starts us into the 2001 story.
So this story is what you've tried to capture in your first book. We're going to talk about your second book here in a little bit too.
Okay.
And I just heard a little foreshadowing to that, because these experiences are not things that we're going through alone.
Right.
Sometimes we don't realize just how many people are having similar experiences, but it becomes such a private battle. And you get stuck just kind of within your story sometimes.
As I was writing Running with Angels, and it didn't start out to be a book either, I was pregnant with this little boy, and in the spring of 2001, he was born with a perfectly formed little body, but just a still heart.
Oh.
So he was stillborn, and I felt like I'd really reached rock bottom at that point. And it was interesting because I went outside, and the sky didn't seem as blue, and colors just didn't seem as vibrant. And so that's when I decided to take that walk. And it lasted about 5 minutes. I turned around and came home, and I thought,
It's about all you could muster,
I don't want to do this. I just want my baby. And so I just kept trying the next day and the next day to go out and go a little bit further. And soon that first 5-minute walk turned into 35, 40, 45-minute, 6-day-a-week experience, I called it, where it was just a life-saving kind of thing, where the walking did so much for me physically, emotionally, and every way. And I really came to understand a lot of truths. And so that's what I'm writing about in Running with Angels. And I really wanted to run a marathon. When I was a teenager, I volunteered at the finish line of the Desert News Marathon. Oh. And so that was one of my dreams. And after I had been walking, I decided to go to Weight Watchers, and so I went there, and after a few months, well, after a little while, about 6 months or so, I'd lost about 50 pounds, and I thought, okay, maybe that marathon goal is within reach. So I started walking, and I remember thinking, well, I've got to start running, obviously, and I went out one night when nobody could see to see how far I could run at one time. And I went about 10 steps and had to stop. So I thought, okay, all I need to do is about 10 more million of these 10 steps.
Stack a bunch of those up, huh?
That's right. And anyway, the next year, in 2002, I ran the Desert News Marathon, and it was quite an experience. So after that, I decided to just write this story down to give to my children and grandchildren at some point, and then I realized that it was the kind of story I would have loved to have read years ago. So that's when I approached the publisher, and they were very good to publish it.
Pam, you just popped off with something that seems so natural to you. You said, and so in 2002, I ran the Deseret News Marathon.
Oh.
Just like, it was on your list that day, so you went ahead and did it. This was something that seemed impossible to you.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
And there's a lot of powerful things that happen to get you to that point. And you mentioned just a few of those. As you started to see some improvement and you started to see some changes, you started to think, well, maybe it is possible. Just last week, I interviewed a fellow on this show who just finished the Badwater Ultra Marathon.
Oh, wow.
Down in Death Valley. It's a 135-mile race, 126-degree heat.
Oh.
Those
are the crazy people.
Yeah. Well, and anybody who listened to last week's show probably would agree with you. But, and I had the same discussion with him. There are things that look impossible to you that you find later on are not impossible. And right now, for you to just mention that you did that, if we were to rewind, 8 or 9 years and just imagine yourself having a radio type interview and just kind of saying that, isn't that amazing to you?
It really is. And I've talked a lot about it, and perhaps that's why it's become, a little, I'm not,
it's
I
just
don't
part
feel
of your
so
story
emotional
now.
about it. Yeah. But it really did. It just took so much. And it was something that I had to do on my own, even though I did have help. As is losing weight and writing a book. There are some things you just have to go through.
Well, there's some powerful parts of that story that we haven't even touched yet. But I think we've done a good introduction to who you are and why you're here. We'll pick that up again right after this break.
Okay.
When you dream big. Dream big. This is Kirk Weasler to tell you about morebetterbooks.com. Morebetterbooks.com is where you can find more better books for a more better life. Not only that, let me tell you about some of the very fun and cool select titles on morebetterbooks.com. You'll want to get a copy of The Dog Poop Initiative. This best-smelling book could change your life forever. It's certainly changed the lives of thousands of Boeing employees, as well as school teachers, parents, leaders across the United States and in Israel and in Germany. And you can get your own copy at morebetterbooks.com. Whoa, that's not all. What about The Cookie Thief? This classic tale told in a rhyming format, fully illustrated with very fun hidden messages. Pick up a copy now today on morebetterbooks.com. Are there great titles there? Finding Your Pathway to Mastery, Beyond Illusions, Make It Great. These titles are only available on morebetterbooks.com. Go to morebetterbooks.com today and begin to have a more better life and live that life on purpose.
Hi, this is Jason Adams, one of the co-founders of CashflowParadigm.com. We created Cashflow Paradigm as a way to help others look at money differently. What are your beliefs about money? Is it good or bad? Many people have beliefs that limit their control over money and don't even realize it. The thing most people don't realize is that their beliefs about money greatly affect the amount of money and prosperity they have. It's all about your paradigm. Come play a fun game with us called Cashflow 101, created by best-selling author Robert Kiyosaki. Come meet new people and check your paradigm as we learn principles that govern our personal and financial lives while having fun together. Currently, we are holding monthly game nights in Provo and St. George, Utah. Go to our website at www.cashflowparadigm.com to register for upcoming events. That's www.cashflowparadigm.com.
So as we were talking during the break, Pam, I remembered a little part from Running with Angels that really caught my attention, because you were, as I recall, you were sitting on the sidelines or something of the marathon up in Salt Lake. This is before you were thinking that you would actually do it.
Right.
And something happened. Would you tell that story?
Sure. I was up there watching my husband. He had actually run the marathon a couple of times, the Desert News Marathon, each time vowing never to do it again. It is a really difficult one. It commemorates the pioneers coming into the Salt Lake Valley. So it comes down Emigration Canyon, and there's a part at the zoo that's about mile 19 or so. Mm-hmm. And so we went up and waited there for him to come down. He kind of told us what his time would be about. And so we stood there watching the other runners come, waiting for him. And this was, I think, 1998. Somewhere around there. So it was before I started the weight loss and training for the marathon. So I was standing there just wishing like anything that I could be running out there with them, but it just seemed virtually impossible at that point in my life. And so as we were standing there cheering, there was a little group of runners that came down, and there was a man that, as he was running down, turned to me and he said, "You should be out here." And I at first looked around at our little group of spectators thinking, okay, this guy is so excited about running, he just wants us all to be out there with him. But then I realized that he was talking to me. And of course, it was just total embarrassment and humiliation. And I thought, well, maybe he's just delusional. He's been running for a few hours.
No oxygen to the brain.
So that's right. But I remembered his face. I remembered his eyes. And anyway, a few runners later, Mark came down, and so we cheered him on. And then we got in the car to drive down to the park to the finish line, and we were going to cheer them on in. And as we parked and went over and watched the runners come in, I watched for this man. And I thought, now, let's see, could I go out there and trip him or strangle him as he comes across the finish line? Or do something, but I watched and watched, and he never came. And I thought, well, maybe that was just something in my imagination, something just telling me that I should be out there, because I wanted so much to be out there. And I received comments along the way, different times that were hurtful, but that was not as much hurtful, but it really was, knowing that I really wanted to be out there, and that I should be out there. I should be out with the rest of what I considered humanity. It was kind of an interesting feeling that I didn't feel part of the world. I felt just apart from where I wanted to be. And so I didn't think anything of it. Well, I did. I thought a lot about it. And when I finally ran that Desert News Marathon, right about that time, I asked my dad to come take a picture of me right at that point. And I put my arms up as high as I could. They only went about halfway up at that point. But I was so excited to finally be there and to finally be out there. And so I love that picture. And I think that picture is in Running with Angels.
I think I remember seeing that in there.
Yeah, and that is right where that man said that to me. Well, a few years later, I found myself getting a running lesson from Hawk Harper over at the Runner's Corner here in Orem. And he owns that store, and he'll fit you with a pair of shoes and then tell you, give you some tips on running. And he's a great guy, and he's actually a neighbor of mine. And so I at that point I thought, I could never have thought of myself getting a running lesson from Hawk Harper, who's won a lot of marathons in his day. And he and his wife are just fabulous runners. His whole family have won many, many awards and races. And one day after that marathon, I was training for the Desert News or the St. George Marathon. We were talking with him just at the nearby track by our house, and he was talking to us about running marathons and telling us how many he'd done. And he said, there was one year that I ran the Desert News Marathon. I came down about the mouth of the canyon and had about 5 more miles to run. And I thought about the donuts and the jacuzzi in my hotel room. So I took off and I just didn't finish it. I said, I can't believe he didn't even finish it. And as we went home, I was thinking, there is just something about his face, his eyes, that I couldn't put my finger on at that time. And then I wondered which year it was that he did that with the marathon. He didn't finish. And so I went back and asked him what year that was. And he said, well, let's see, that was when so-and-so won it. And I think that was about 1998. Anyway, it was the same year that I had been there, and that man had said something to me. And so I said, do you say things to people when you run? And he said, oh, yeah, I do all the time. Cheryl, my wife, says, oh, don't do that, but I do. And I said, do you think you said to somebody you should be out here? And he said, yeah, I say that a lot because, maybe not a lot, but I say that because somebody said that to me once. And we figured, and I am certain that it was he that said him. That. Yeah, so I still wanted to strangle him.
I just thought that was a fun part of the story. Oh. And it illustrates an interesting thing to me, because we can get so stuck in our own kind of victim story in life. Sometimes it takes something like that. And when he said that to you, your first impression was to be offended or to be embarrassed.
Yeah.
And really, he was speaking truth to you.
He was. Yeah, as much as it hurt. It's
the same truth that you had been telling yourself, but for whatever reason, you were remaining stuck.
Yep.
You've had some powerful experiences. I like, there's one other thing I want to hear from you about this Running with Angels story. And on the cover, there's a picture of a woman who's running, and she's running alone, kind of. Because in the reflection in the water, there are 2 children following her.
Right.
And this is the whole theme of the Running with Angels title. Can you talk about that a little bit? What is that?
As I was training for the marathon and trying to lose the weight and write the book and just overcome obstacles in life, as everyone tries, I thought about those 2 children, our little Emily, who died just after birth, and our stillborn son, whom we call Eric. I thought about them and just felt them cheering me on, felt their, as any parent that I've talked to has felt, just that presence of their children, being with them. And it's something that just doesn't ever go away. My twin daughter, Amy, now is 19. And although it's been a while, there's still that yearning for that baby. And yet it was so it was a real spiritual journey, but I felt them near, and I still do, cheering me on and trying to make it through overcoming obstacles.
So there were people who were alive and visible cheering you on. But there was this team of angels cheering you on too.
Yeah.
Which gave you some of the strength that you needed to overcome the difficult challenges that come when you want to make a transformation in your life. I
really believe we have earthly and heavenly angels watching out for us. And one of the neat things I did before the first marathon was I wrote down, a marathon's 26.2 miles. So I wrote down 26.2 people that had helped me get that far. And every mile I took out that list, and my husband and I, who ran it with me, we talked about that person or group of people. And it was a real wonderful lesson in gratitude and realizing the people that help, our support system, our angel system that helps us get to where we want to be.
Mm-hmm. Wow. Gratitude is one of the most powerful principles. Well, I'll call it a principle because I think that there's a lot of natural laws surrounding gratitude that can just break you free from things that are holding you captive.
Right.
I can imagine that made it a little easier to do the next mile, too.
It did. And to look forward. And I've had a lot of people come up and say, I just ran a marathon and I did that. And it was just an amazing experience. And even if we're not physically running a marathon, I think it's important to realize those that are there to help us. And in turn, whom we can help as well. Mm-hmm.
That's right.
Along their journey.
So I would like to invite you to think about what some of the most powerful lessons are that you have learned through your experiences. And I know that you've got a number of those. I don't know that we can cover them all in this show. What bubbles to the top of the list for you? What just pops into your head when I present that?
Probably making time to rejuvenate ourselves, physically, emotionally, spiritually, and how important that is that we just take time out to do that. It's hard. It's a lot harder than it.
What do you think makes it hard?
Oh, just life. There are so many lovely interruptions and not so lovely interruptions. Mm-hmm. I'm talking about children and church callings and community service and so many things in our lives that take up our time. Mm-hmm. And we just need to prioritize and see what's really important to us and spend our time doing those things.
I've been involved in a coaching program for myself called the Strategic Coach. And one of the first things that they teach is to do just that, to find time to rejuvenate yourself. And Dan Sullivan, who is the founder of this program, pointed out that the definition of the word rejuvenate means to make young again. Huh. It's got the same root as juvenile, for example. Okay, so rejuvenation means to make young again.
Interesting.
And I don't know about you, Pam. You're still pretty young. But I've noticed as I get older, there's some appeal to being young again,
Yes.
You literally rejuvenated yourself, though, through this transformation as you went through your weight loss and as you changed the image of yourself that would be consistent with the person that you could be and not the person that you were becoming through ignoring that rejuvenation. Mm-hmm. We could maybe work with that. We'll be right back. Stick with us.
Some people give their 2 cents, but this positive island boy shares a dime every time he speaks. Dino Pinder is back with another deposit to your attitude.
What is this generation coming to? Well, you want to know what it's coming to? It's coming to however you bring up your children. That's the next world. That's the next generation. And I think we're failing in a lot of areas. One being, I think we as parents and we borrow money we don't have to buy things we don't need to impress people we don't like. And I think when we get to that case, we need to rearrange ourselves and get our priorities straight. If we got to work, both partners, 12, 15-hour days to keep our Mercedes and to keep our sports cars and our big Denali's, we're working way too much for things that's going to rust and fade out when our children are being the ones that are being neglected and they're the ones that need us the most.
This has been Dino's Dime. For more island wisdom, visit dinosdime.wordpress.com.
Thank you for listening to Live on Purpose Radio. Some of you have been asking how you can get more involved with the show, and I also appreciate those of you who have offered to support the show. Now you can do both easily by purchasing a Top Spots listing. For a very small donation to the show, Your link will be posted at liveonpurposeradio.com. Just go to the website and look for the Top Spots widget on the right side panel. Click at the bottom and follow the simple instructions. You will then be at the top of the list. Thanks for your support. You know, Pam, we just heard Dino's Dime. And Dino's a good friend of mine who's doing some good thinking, I think. It's easy for people to get caught up with some of the pressing. You know, you talked about these interruptions that come, and some of them are sweet and meaningful and powerful, and others are just the kind that consume your time and energy and don't return much value. And we can get so consumed with stuff that sometimes we lose sight of the really important things.
And to be fair, I mean, interruptions has kind of a negative connotation. But, for instance, when Sarah was with her arthritis and she couldn't do much in the morning, it was really hard for me to say, honey, you know, you crawl into the bathroom and get a warm bath to feel better. I'm going to go out to go for a walk. I just couldn't do that. And so there are times and seasons in our lives where it'll be a lot easier to do than others. And I think particularly we as women, really beat ourselves up because we cannot be doing everything we want to be doing right then.
There's just too much. That brings up a lot of different questions about how you prioritize and what gets to take those top spots. But as you're saying, and this is a careful balance too, because if your daughter or your son who is not physically or just developmentally capable of fulfilling their own needs, of course it's going to be the parent that has to step in and do that, and that's going to be an interruption to whatever else you're doing.
Right.
And then the balance with what we were talking about just before the break, with rejuvenating and with taking care of yourself. And I've often mentioned, and I really like the analogy of the airplane, when they're going through the safety routine and they get to the part about if we lose cabin pressure, then these oxygen masks will fall down, you know? And if you're traveling with young children, put your own mask on first.
Right. And
then help the person that you're with. That's the balance.
That's so important.
Wow, and you're looking at these kids and you're thinking, wow, they need me. I have to do this.
Yep.
But if your own mask isn't on and you're soon, unconscious in the aisle, you're just in the way now.
And you're not able to help them.
And you're not able to help them.
Yep.
So that's the trick. What would you advise people to do from what you've learned? How do you do it?
Oh, it's really difficult, and I'm still finding now there are times when I don't get to go out and do my full walk or my things that I want to do, but at the same time, well, for instance, a few years ago I was training for a marathon and I was really excited about it, and my daughter had just turned 16 and she was going out on dates and coming home late. And I'd be finding as, she was going on and on about her evening on Friday nights at midnight. We were standing there talking. I would think, I need to get to bed. I've got to run 12 miles in the morning. And yet listening to her, I thought, this is what I really want to be doing, is sitting here listening to about her life, about her dreams. And so I backed out of the marathon that year. And it was tough to get in, and yet that's what I really wanted to do. And so at that time, that's what my priorities were. As far as saying anything to anybody, encouraging them, I would have been much better off those years when Sarah was really struggling with her arthritis, and there were just different things in my life that I was struggling with. I would have been much better off just taking that little time out to rejuvenate, to go on the walk, to do that. But it's easier said than done.
Yeah.
And for some people, I really vacillate between saying, get out there, spend a little time on yourself, and just telling people, you know what, you're doing okay. Right now in your life, you've got this and this and that going on. You're just doing what you can, and that's what you need to do right now.
I believe, don't you believe this, that people are doing the very best they know how to do?
I think for the most part, yes.
For the most part. Well, there's some notable exceptions, but for the most part, you just do the best that you know how to do.
Right.
And sometimes there's a risk, I think, when you say, well, take care of yourself, do something for yourself. And then whoever's hearing that is saying, oh, great. There's one more thing I'm not doing well.
Absolutely.
And they can beat themselves up.
Yep. And I think we are really good at that, and looking around, comparing ourselves. And that's how the whole premise for Finding the Angel Within came. Because it was interesting because I was writing Running with Angels, I thought, am I the only one that feels this way? And it was really hard to get my story out there because I'm up till then I've been a pretty private person, but I just felt
it's a very personal story in so many ways too.
Well, and it's probably more than you even want to know about me in that book, but it
TMI. Yeah, my kids say that. Too much information.
Right, but I was floored with the incredibly personal, heart-wrenching emails, letters, phone calls that I received.
As a response to Running with Angels.
Right. And actually I'm still getting from people that read the book and go to the website and contact me. But I decided then that there were so many people that said, I feel the same way. And I wanted my husband to read this so he could feel how I felt when we lost our baby, or when he doesn't think that it's really hard for me to lose weight. And I want him to know how difficult it is and how it really feels. And you talked about trying to impress people we don't like, or I guess that was...
The Dino's Dime segment.
Right. And I think we so often jump to conclusions about people, and that we want to impress people, and on the other side of the coin, we just often think about people things differently than are just not true, or not really how they're feeling about things. And there were a few stories in here in Finding the Angel Within that I included that were written by women that felt that way, that felt like they just didn't measure up, and just couldn't do it.
So capture this second book for us, will you? Finding the Angel Within. This is one that you just published this year.
Right. Just
and it's not really a sequel or a follow-up or anything to Running with Angels, other than it extends an important idea that you've introduced with your first book, but it has to do more with what's locked inside of people, and particularly women. I think you're focusing on women for this book, even though the principles apply to anyone.
Right. The second book's a little bit more directed toward women, but really anybody, and I think they're either women or people that are trying to understand women.
That sums up most of us.
I don't think we're all that difficult to understand, but...
No. Vicky sometimes jokes about this. She says, I'd rather be a woman than be a man and have to live with a woman. I always thought that was kind of funny. But.
Oh, well, that's true. My poor husband, he's a great sport. No, he's wonderful, and he's been very understanding, very accepting through the years, and that's been an incredibly supportive part of my experience.
It is. I think there are few things in this world that match up to having a close, intimate relationship with a spouse.
Right.
That is just so important in every aspect of life. That's a whole different show, I know. But
yeah, that's important.
I appreciate you mentioning that for that reason. But capture this book for us a little bit. What is the message of Finding the Angel Within? Well,
a lot of it is about not listening so much to the world's voices, which just scream so loud, but listening to the voices that we can feel inside, the spiritual voices that talk to us. That sounded kind of weird, but just the.
It's okay. We have a weird show.
The spiritual guidance that we receive, it isn't quite so loud. It's a still small voice, and so I talk a little bit about listening to that voice more than listening to the world voices. We can't go through a grocery store line without seeing those magazines and all those pictures. And what we don't realize is that so many of those are airbrushed, are doctored up to make these women look perfect. And not only do we want to look like them, but we look around at others just around us and think that they have such a better life than we do. Better family life, they can cook better, their children get better grades. So many times that we compare ourselves with other women that we really just shouldn't do. And again, that's easier said than done.
Well, the comparison is always to what? And there's this standard that is set by whom?
Right.
You talk about the grocery store line, and we've all seen those magazines that are sitting there. Mm-hmm. And it's usually someone who looks a little unnatural, if you know what natural looks like.
Right.
How many times when you're at the local rec center in the dressing room you see people look like that? I mean, let's be real, people.
Yeah, thanks for that visual.
But there's this false standard, you know what I'm saying?
Absolutely.
Compared to what, And the voices that are screaming to you, you're not good enough. You're not perfect enough. You don't look right. Mm-hmm. Okay? Well, whose opinion is that? And how much do you want to, really trust that opinion?
Right.
I like what you said about this much more subtle, peaceful, still, small voice that says something very different to you.
Right.
And what if we started listening to that one a little more?
We'd be much better off.
So you've listened to both, haven't you?
Oh, yeah.
Any difference in happiness you experience?
Oh, boy, the peaceful... yeah, it's a lot more peaceful, of course, to hear that still small voice and to act on that. Mm-hmm.
Well, we've got one more segment to develop this just a little bit farther as we come back from this next break. Stick with us.
Temptations are strong. I need to pray if you want to change the path you're on. Just say I need to wake up. I forgot what's important now. Wake up, 'cause money ain't everything. Wake up.
If the pile of books you want to read is growing faster than the pile you have read, then Abundant Reading Systems can help you. After taking Abundant Reading Systems course, I dramatically increased my ability to expand my knowledge in a much more efficient way.
My fastest test today was in the 7,000 words per minute. I highly recommend this program. From what I've seen it do for other people who've been through the entire program and from what I've seen in myself today.
I've teamed up with Abundant Reading Systems to offer a single-day intensive speed reading workshop that will at least double your reading speed, guaranteed.
This belief started to grow inside of me that I thought, I can really do this. I can read, as fast as I let myself read. And ended up doubling my speed reading time, which was really good.
This is David Hinton, founder of Abundant Reading Systems. I want to personally invite you to join us for our next event. Visit AbundantReadingSystems.com now. Abundant Reading Systems, reading at the speed of imagination.
Raising kids is one of the most challenging and rewarding experiences we can have in life. Your children didn't come with an owner's manual, so it's up to you to learn whatever will assist you in your role as a mom or a dad. Join me and my husband, Dr. Paul, for a free weekly discussion about all of the hot topics in parenting. Listen to what others are saying about these calls.
By applying the things I've learned through the Parental Power calls, I'm finally becoming the mom I always thought I would be.
I really like to use Parental Power as kind of like a reference book So as I have concerns with my parenting, I like to be able to look up on the blog and then listen to whatever podcast seems closely related. So I like the variety of topics, the variety of age groups that are addressed.
I'm on the parental power calls as often as I possibly can because I know I'm going to come away with something I can apply to being a parent that very day.
Let us join your parenting team through Parental Power. Just send an email to Dr. Paul at liveonpurposeradio.com to register for the live calls. Or just check us out first through the link at drpaul.org. All of the previous calls are posted on our blog site, where you can also add your own input. Let's team up to start parenting on purpose. Pam, I don't know about you, but I'm having fun.
I'm having a great time.
I don't think I told you my twin sister's name is Pam.
Oh.
That part's not hard for me to remember. You didn't even know I had a twin sister, did you?
I didn't. How's it been growing up as a twin?
You know, it was fabulous.
Huh.
It was really cool. Still is.
Oh, good.
Yeah, it's fun to tell people that. And we don't hang out like we used to. Because we've kind of both grown up and have our own direction in life, but that was really fun. You know, you mentioned your twins, and there's something special about having a twin.
It was interesting to watch Amy in her first few years of life. She was in mourning. She cried a lot. And I remember finally taking her to the pediatrician saying, what's wrong with this poor baby? And he said, she's mourning her sister.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, we build connections and relationships that start very young, and there's a deep and a meaningful bond, and I believe that bond is not something that's limited to the period of our mortal lives, and that's just one of my own beliefs that I share with a lot of people in my particular religion, of which you're also a member. But, you know, I've talked to so many people of different faiths, too, who really see, they get that relationships are the most fundamental key of our lives. That's what it's all about. That's what it comes down to.
And I think going through different experiences, tragedy, enable us to think about the whole, not just this life. And not just right now, but a lot of time in the future and eternity, and what's really important.
That's the power of perspective. And it changes what you can do here and now. You know, we were talking, just before our last break, we were talking about comparisons. And compared to what? When you think something in your life is hard, you're comparing it to something that's easier.
That's right.
You know? And if you think something in your life is easy, you're comparing it to something that's hard. And so it's always in comparison to something.
Right.
And if you get mired in that, oh, my life is so hard and this, you know, I'm so awful or whatever. Okay, compared to what? and just to have some responsibility for your thinking, you know, be willing to take a look at what it is that you're comparing yourself to. And that's dangerous, don't you think? Comparing yourself?
Oh, absolutely. And I think that's one of the well, if not one of the biggest problem with our body image and our self-worth is that we compare ourselves to, you know, whatever the ideal image is. And that I think worldly voices encourage us to treat our bodies as objects.
That's true.
And so, you know, you can look at that object and see how much work needs to be done to make that in harmony with what the world sees as ideal. And I don't think our Father in Heaven created us to be the same. We are all different, and that's what makes life interesting.
You know, one of my favorite quotes along those lines is that you are perfectly designed to be imperfect. Everyone
That's true.
is. But psychologically, there's this interesting thing that happens because your mind is also designed to notice imperfections.
Right.
So if I show you a series of dots, for example, and one of them is missing, your eye is immediately going to go to the missing dot.
Mm-hmm.
And I do this sometimes in my office where I draw up 25 dots, or they think they're supposed to be 25, 5x5 array of dots, and I leave one out on purpose. And everybody says, well, there's one dot missing. And nobody yet has said the first time, oh, there's 24 dots perfectly in place. You just don't notice that.
Yeah.
Psychologically, you're going to hone in on what's not perfect.
Right.
And that's okay. That's just how we're designed.
And it's too bad because, as parents, we're trying our hardest to tell our kids, to encourage them. And that's a whole other topic, too. But unfortunately, they remember the things the negative things, go clean your room again. And we remember the things, looking at a face, everything can be lovely on it except for maybe a blemish. And that's the thing that stands out.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
Yeah.
One of the things I really liked about your second book, Finding the Angel Within, you spent some time on this whole body image thing and presented an idea that some people haven't really thought about, and that is just how wonderful their body is. Just by nature of it being their body,
right,
is a wonderful thing. And your body, prior to 1989, 1990, when you started to work on some things personally, your body was wonderful too. You didn't see it that way, did you?
No, I didn't. I didn't believe it.
Right, which is part of what kept you stuck.
Right.
Don't you believe that there's a certain level of acceptance that has to happen before you can really start to make some of the improvements that you want to make?
Absolutely. I heard so often you have to love yourself to do any change. And I thought, I don't. There was a lot of self-loathing over those years because my body wouldn't do what I wanted it to do. I felt like my spirit and my body were always working against each other. And it was finally the experience of losing this little stillborn baby, thinking back to his birth and how he came pretty quickly, but the placenta didn't. And I realized days later, after the doctor really had to work on getting the placenta and everything to come, I thought, not only did my spirit want to hang on to this baby, but my body didn't want to let it go either.
Mm-hmm.
And it felt like we were finally all working together, my spirit, my body. And there's really an intimate connection between body, mind, and spirit. And
That's
that is
right.
one thing that I have come to understand and to know that we just have one body in this life and how important it is to take care of it. It gets harder as we get older.
Well, and yeah, there's some truth to that. We get the cart before the horse sometimes too, or we get this all reversed in thinking, well, I will love myself once I make some changes, or if I'm able to do this, then I will feel okay about myself. And that's backwards.
Yep.
Because you have to achieve that acceptance first, and then you can do all kinds of wonderful things that you thought were impossible before.
And that was really hard for me to do, to accept, to love myself. So what I did was start to have compassion. I thought, if my friend or one of my sisters were going through losing another baby, what would I do to help her? Well, I would want to love her, to be there, to help her life be easier, to help her to feel rejuvenated.
That's
and
right.
Why can't I do that for me? And I think we get a lot of times really caught up in helping other people and making sure, and we do need to serve. That is very important that we do that. But oftentimes we don't take the time to do that for ourselves.
This compassion that you're talking about, powerful concept. Why do we always get stuck in this trap of thinking that somehow we're a special case? You know what I mean? It's a form of pride that's really destructive.
Right.
But like you were saying, if it were your friend or your sister or your daughter or someone who's going through this, your heart would just be opened up with all kinds of compassion and service and love.
Right.
And yet when you're going through it, you know, we have a tendency ourselves to be a little cruel instead of compassionate.
And even though we do have loved ones around to help us, and they're there, we still need to have compassion and have that love for ourselves. And that's what finally got me to change. That having that compassion and thinking, you know what, I'm going to just take the time to go on a walk. I'm going to take the time to plan the meals. And, you know, I find myself doing that now. That's what I've got to do to keep on the track. And those little decisions that we make every day add up to the big ones and changing our lives.
Mm-hmm. It's true. I think that there's a lot of little things that you can do. I know that some of our listeners are going to be thinking, wow, that's a really inspiring story, Pam, and thanks for sharing that, and I wish that I could do something like that. What would be your words to them?
Well, a lot of people say, oh, I have absolutely no desire to run a marathon.
Right.
And that's fine. But I really believe that each one of us is running some kind of marathon. And to realize that we do go through hard things, and we need to step back and say, okay, what am I going to do to get through this? And plan those steps. Because like as you said at the first, it's not just marathon day. It's planning, you know, going up to that training and going through all those things to ensure that you can get through.
I think you have to get to a point where you've convinced yourself that it's possible.
Right.
And I think that's analogous to faith. You know, when you get your own belief to the point where you can see it, you can see that it's going to happen, and you build on that. And you might not be able to go right to the marathon, you know, if you're 150 pounds overweight or something, and you're thinking, you know, that's too much. But can you get yourself to the point where you're going to go take the walk?
Right. Walk to the mailbox. Walk to the end of the driveway. And during those walks, that was a great time for me to do some meditation, to listen to music, to pray. Oh, I cried. I talked to my husband and friends, just different things. But that was my time to really self-rejuvenate. And still, I think that's such an important part of life.
And pay attention to what it is you're saying to yourself.
Right.
Maybe try some different messages. And practice some of that compassion.
Right.
Well, Pam, we're coming up on the end of our program. I want to make sure that people have access to you. I'm going to put up a link on Live on Purpose Radio for both of these books so that people can just click right through and buy them, and I highly recommend them. I think that there's some great ideas. What else can people do to get connected with what you're doing?
They can go to runningwithangels.com, and perhaps that's the link that you'll put up there. And there are more pictures and stories and things there. We do a Running with Angels benefit 5K every year. And a lot of people, that is their first time out doing something for themselves. And it's a wonderful experience.
So it's a great place to start it if that's something that you haven't done before.
And they can reach me too at pam@runningwithangels.com. That's on the website as well.
I think that's where I found you finally.
Well, it's great to be here.
You know, thank you so much for joining us for this program today. I am so impressed with what you've done with your books, with what you're doing to inspire other people, to find that angel within them, and to break free from whatever's holding them captive.
Thank you. Thanks for having me today.
Thank you. Everybody go out there and live on purpose. We'll be back next week.